Welcome back. Let's read some more. The sun's shining now, so now the temperature is getting up and up and up very fast to 30 degrees or more. So let's get some cola. So it's 11:30 soon. And maybe I have to stop reading because of the heating. When it's 30 degrees, I start to feel bad. Then I had to stop reading, just watch Star Trek and waiting for the sun go down. No, not feel bad, I just feel I not feel so well when it's very hot in my apartments, because my body weight is very high. So just drink a lot of cola water. So just reading another day, but just waiting. I have to wait the weather change. I have to wait the sun stops shining. But the sun go down in 8 hours. In 8 or 9 hours the sun go down. Around 7 p.m.
T-80. T-80 redirects here. For other uses, see T-80, disambiguation. The T-80 is a main battle tank, MBT, that was designed and manufactured in the former Soviet Union and manufactured in Russia. The T-80 is based on the T-64, while incorporating features from the later T-72 and changing the engine to a gas turbine. When it entered service in 1976, it was the first production tank to be powered solely by turbine. The chief designer of the T-80 was Soviet engineer Nikolai Popov. The T-80U was last produced in 2001 in a factory in Omsk, Russia. In 2023, the CEO of Uralvagonzavod announced that production would restart. The Ukrainian T-80U diesel engine variant continued to be produced in Ukraine. The T-80 and its variants are in service in Belarus, Cyprus, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Russia, South Korea, Ukraine and Uzbekistan. Ukraine further developed the T-80U as the T-84. History, edit. Development, edit. The project to build the first Soviet turbine-powered tank began in 1949. Its designer was a chap Starostyenko, who worked at the Leningrad Kirov plant, LKZ. The tank was never built because available turbine engines were of very poor quality. In 1955, two prototype 1000 HP, 746 kilowatts, turbine engines were built at the same plant under the guidance of Geo Globlin. 2 years later, a team led by Joseph Kotin constructed two prototypes of the Object 278 tank. Both were hybrids of the IS-7 and the T-10 heavy tanks, powered by the GTD-1 turbine engine, weighing 53.5 tons and armed with an M65 130mm tank gun. The turbine engine allowed the tank to reach a maximum speed of 57.3 km per hour, 35.6 miles per hour, however with only 1,950 liters of fuel on board. their range was limited to only 300 kilometers, 190 mi. The two tanks were considered experimental vehicles and work on them eventually ceased. In 1963, the Morozov Design Bureau designed the T-64, normally powered by the 5TDF diesel. They also experimented with the T-64T with GTD3TL turbine engines which generated 700 HP, 522 kilowatts. This was tested until 1965. At the same time, at Ural-Vagonzavod, a design team under the guidance of Leonid N. Kartsev created the Object 167T tank. In 1964, in its report to First Secretary Nikita Khrushchev, the team reported that the design was not worth pursuing partly due to its high fuel use. Soviet T-80 during maneuvers, March 1986. In 1960, Khrushchev ended all heavy tank programs. LKZ, concerned with the poor reliability of the 5TD diesel engine of the T-64, was freed to focus on gas turbine tank engine development. In 1967, the SP Isotov Bureau at the Klimov Research Production Association was assigned to this project. Rather than repurpose an existing helicopter engine, Isotov built the GTD-1000T from scratch. In 1966, the LKZ built the experimental Object 288 rocket tank powered by two Klimov GTD-350 turbine engines from the Mil-Me-2 helicopter, offering a combined power of 691 HP, 515 kilowatts. Trials indicated that twin propulsion was no better than the turbine engine which had been in development since 1968 at LKZ and Transmash. Object 219, edit. The tank from LKZ equipped with this turbine engine was designed by Nikolai Popov. It was constructed in 1969 and designated Object 219 SP1. It was essentially the T-64T powered by a GTD-1000T multi-fuel gas turbine engine producing up to 1000 HP, 746 kilowatts. During the trials it became clear that the increased weight and dynamic characteristics required a complete redesign of the vehicle's suspension. The second prototype, designated Object 219 SP2, received bigger drive sprockets and return rollers. The number of road wheels was increased from 5 to 6. The construction of the turret was altered to use the same compartment, 125 mm to a 46 tank gun, autoloader and placement of ammunition as the T-64. Some other equipment was borrowed from the T-64. The LKZ plant built a series of prototypes based on Object 219 SP2. Production history, edit. This T-80 BV has reactive armor adapted to its turret and hull. The later T-80U has a large applique of explosive reactive armor installed, providing higher crew and tank survivability than prior models. In November 1974, Minister of Defense Andrei Grigko denied approval to put the Object 219 into production due to the tank's high fuel use and lack of advantages in armament and armor over other tanks then in production. Grigko died in April 1976, and Dmitry Ustinov, an enthusiastic supporter of the Object 219, was appointed in his place. The Object 219-2 was accepted for production as the T-80 in August 1976. The Object 219R, incorporating combination K composite armor, was accepted for Soviet service in 1978 as the T-80B. Production of the original T-80 ended that same year. The T-80B entered production at Transmash in 1979. Omsk developed a command version called the T-80BK. The T-80B was deployed with the group of Soviet forces in Germany in 1981. Initially, the T-80 was confused with the Soviet T-72 by some Western analysts. They are the products of different design bureaus. The T-80 is from the SKB-2 Design Bureau of the Kirov factory, LKZ, in Leningrad, while the T-72 is from the Ural-Vagonzavod factory in Nizhny Tagil. They are similar in superficial appearance, but the T-80 is based on the earlier T-64, while incorporating features from the T-72, which was a complementary design. The T-64 in turn was an earlier high-technology main battle tank, designed by the Morozov Design Bureau in Kharkiv to replace the T-54/55 and T-62 MBTs, used before in the Soviet Union. From a distance, the T-64, T-72 and T-80 look alike. Despite the similarities, the T-80 is 90 centimeters longer than the T-64, and the T-80 and T-72 are mechanically very different. The T-72 is mechanically simpler, easier to manufacture, and easier to service in the field. As such, the T-72 was intended to be a tank mass-produced to equip the bulk of the Soviet motor rifle units, and for sale to export partners and Eastern Bloc satellite states. The T-80 design improved on several aspects of the earlier T-64 design, introducing a gas turbine engine in the original model, and incorporating suspension components of the T-72. This gave the tank a high power-to-weight ratio and made it easily the most mobile tank in service, albeit with acute range problems, as the turbine used fuel rapidly, even at engine idle. Morozov's subsequent parallel development of the T-80U replaced the gas turbine with a commercial turbodiesel, to decrease fuel use and maintenance needs. In comparison to its anticipated opponent, the American M1 Abrams has a larger, 1,500 HP, 1,120 kilowatts, gas turbine, but weighs 61 tons compared to the T-80's 42.6 tons, so it has a worse HP/T ratio of 24.5 compared to 27.1 and is less maneuverable than the T-80, with GT. The T-80 can fire the same 9K112 Cobra, at 8 Songster, anti-tank guided missile through the main gun as the T-64. Russian T-80U of the 4th Tank Brigade, 2011. The T-80U main battle tank, 1985, U for Ulechshiny, meaning improvement, was designed by SKB-2 in Leningrad, Hull, and the Morozov Bureau, Turret and Armament. It is a further development of the T-80 and is powered by the 1,250 HP, 919 kilowatts, GTD 1250 gas turbine. It is a step ahead of the GTD 1000T and GTD 1000TF engines that were installed on the previous tanks of the T-80 line. This gas turbine can use jet fuels, diesel, and low-octane gasoline, and has good dynamic stability, service life, and reliability. The GTD 1250 has a built-in automatic system of dust deposit removal. It retains the T-80's high fuel use, which the Russian army found unacceptable during the First Chechen War. It is equipped with the Tu-46 fire control system and a new turret. The T-80U is protected by a second generation of explosive reactive armor called Contact 5, which can reduce the penetration of armor-piercing Finstabilis discarding Sabot, APFS, rounds, such as the M829A1 Silver Bullet, by 38%, and of high explosive anti-tank, heat, rounds. Contact 5 had been developed as a response to the threat of modern AFVs, spurred by testing that found that the Israeli 105mm M111 AFVs ammunition could defeat the glacis armor of the latest models of the T-72 and T-80. The Contact 5 is integrated into the design of the turret, hull, and broad-M deep wading equipment. Like all of the previous T-80 models, the T-80U has full-length rubber side skirts protecting the sides, with those above the first 3 road wheels being armored and are provided with lifting handles. It can fire the 9M119 Reflex, at-11 Sniper, guided missile and the long rod penetrator, VAPFS, 3BM46. The remotely controlled commander's machine gun was replaced by a more flexible pintle-mounted one. A special camouflage paint distorts the tank's appearance in the visible and IR wavebands. The T-80 US-146 fire control system includes a laser range finder, a ballistics computer, and a more advanced 1G46 gunner's main sights, which greatly increases the T-80's firepower over previous models. These new systems, together with the 125mm D81TM Rapier 3 smoothbore gun, ensure that the T-80U can hit targets at a range of up to 5 km, ATGMs and HV/APFs. An experienced crew at the international exhibition was able to successfully strike 52 targets without a miss at a distance of 5 km using guided rockets. The T-80U-M of the 1990s introduced the Tu-1Po-2A Gava gunner's thermal imaging sight and 9M119M Reflex M guided missile, and later, an improved Tu-46M4 version of the 125mm gun and 1G46M gunner's sight was used. Russian tank production faltered in the years before and after the breakup of the Soviet Union. At the 2 remaining Russian tank plants, state orders all but ceased. Omsk, then the only Russian producer of the T-80, received orders for just 5 T-80Us in 1992. Around the same time, the Russian Ministry of Defense decided it would commit to eventually producing 1 tank type only. Though both Nizhny Tagil's T-90 and Omsk's T-80U had their merits, the T-80 was notorious for its high fuel use and production cost. Also, Russian T-80 BVs suffered appalling losses in their first combat use during the First Chechen War. T-90s, which were not deployed to Chechnya, were spared media criticism despite the similarly poor performance of the T-72, the T-90's not-so-different ancestor, in the same conflict. In January 1996, Colonel General Alexander Gorkin, Chief of Main Armor Directorate of the Russian Ministry of Defense, said the Russian armed forces would phase out T-80 production in favor of the T-90. Gorkin reversed his position later that year, claiming the T-80U was a superior tank. Production of the T-80 at Omsk persisted until 2001, mainly for the export market. In September 2023, the CEO of Uralvagonzavod, Alexander Potapov, said that they had been tasked by the military to resume manufacture of the T-80. It is unknown how long the process of restarting the production line will take. Ukrainian T-80U, edit. In parallel with the T-80U and Russia in general, the Morozov Bureau in Ukraine developed a diesel-powered version, the T-80U. It is powered by the 1000 HP 6TD 6-cylinder opposed piston multi-fuel 2-stroke turbo piston diesel engine, ensuring high fuel efficiency and a long cruising range. The engine support systems make it possible to operate the tank at ambient temperatures of up to 55 degrees Celsius and ford water obstacles 1.8 m in depth. The T-80U shares most of the T-80US improvements, but can be distinguished from it by a different engine deck and distinctive smoke mortar array and turret stowage boxes. It retains the remotely controlled commander's machine gun. About 500 T-80U tanks were built in the Milishev plant between 1987 and 1991. About 300 were still at the Ukrainian factory when the Soviet Union broke up, so the T-80U tank was welcomed into Ukrainian military service, and therefore is more common in Ukrainian service than Russian. Unlike Russia, Ukraine has had much better success selling T-80s to foreign customers. Cyprus bought a number of T-80s and T-80UKs from Russia for its army. Pakistan bought Ukrainian T-80Us for the Pakistan Armored Corps. The Ukrainian T-84 main battle tank is based on the T-80U. Ukraine was only able to afford a negligible number of T-84s for its own use, but did market the tank for export. The T-84 Oplot, first delivered in 2001, introduced turret bustle ammunition storage, and to offer more sales to international market. The T-84-120 Yatagan has been offered for export, featuring a very large turret bustle and NATO-compatible 120mm gun. Service history, edit. Soviet Union, edit. In 1989, there were 3,000 T-80 MBTs overall. According to data published in Russia, 2,256 T-80s, up to the T-80BV model, as T-80Us were never deployed in Europe, were stationed with the group of Soviet forces in Germany in East Germany between 1986 and 1987. In 1991, when the Soviet Union was breaking up, the Soviet Army operated 4,839 T-80 MBTs of several different models. In August 1991, Communists and Allied military commanders tried to overthrow Mikhail Gorbachev and regain control over the unstable Soviet Union. T-80U tanks of the 4th Guards Kantomirovskaya Tank Division drove onto the streets of Moscow, but the Soviet coup attempt failed when the tank crews refused to attack the crowd or the parliament. Russia, edit. Before the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, the T-80 was not used in the way in which it was intended, large-scale conventional war in Europe. Until 2022, it was deployed amid the political and economic turmoil in Russia during the 1990s. Most T-80 MBTs are possessed by Russia, though many were inherited by Ukraine, Belarus and Kazakhstan. In 1995, the number of T-80 tanks increased to around 5,000 but shrank to 3,500 in 1998. The Russian army had 3,044 T-80s and variants in active service and 1,456 in reserve as of 2008. There are at least 460 T-80U in service with the 2nd Guards Tamanskaya Motor Rifle Division and 4th Guards Kantomirovsk Motor Rifle Division. A T-80BV is on display in Kubinka Tank Museum and a T-80U is on display at an open-air museum in Saratov. The T-80Us have recently been seen at arms expos in Russia such as VTTV. During the 1993 Russian constitutional crisis, Boris Yeltsin ordered the use of tanks against the Supreme Soviet and the Congress of People's Deputies opposing him. On the 4th of October, 1993, 6 T-80Us from the 13th Guards Tank Regiment, 4th Guards Kantomirovskaya Tank Division took positions on a bridge opposite the Russian Parliament building, and fired on it. First Chechen War, edit. Neither the T-80B nor the T-80BV were ever used in the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s in order to keep the tank's characteristics a secret, but they were first used during the First Chechen War. This first real combat experience for T-80 was unsuccessful, as the tanks were used to capture cities, a task for which they were not very well suited, in particular due to the low depression and elevation of the Tu-46 M1 gun on all Russian MBTs. The biggest tank losses were incurred during the ill-fated assault in the Battle of Grozny, which began in December 1994. During 3 months of combat, Russia lost 18 of the 84 T-80 tanks used by the 133rd and 3rd Tank Battalions. The forces chosen to capture Grozny were not prepared for such an operation, while the city was defended by, among others, former Soviet soldiers. Some T-80 tanks used in the assault lacked explosive reactive armor inserts. Several tank-to-tank battles were recorded. During the fighting in late December 1994 and early January 1995, Russian T-80 tanks destroyed at least 6 rebel tanks. On the opposing side, one T-80 was disabled by a 125 mm shell. Another T-80 received 3 or 4 tank shell hits but remained in service. In August 1996, a T-80 destroyed one rebel tank. The inexperienced crews had little knowledge of the layout of the city, while the tanks were attacked by rocket-propelled grenade teams hidden in cellars and on top of high buildings. The anti-tank fire was directed at the least armored parts of the vehicles. In the build-up of forces before the assault on Grozny, T-80s had been transferred from depots to units with little experience with the tank. When no auxiliary power unit is equipped, the T-80s gas turbine engines use almost as much fuel idling as when they are running. Most tank crews inadvertently exhausted their fuel this way on the day of the assault. After the First Chechen War, edit. The T-80 performed so poorly in the First Chechen War that after the conflict, General Lieutenant Alexander Borkin, head of the Armor Directorate, convinced the Minister of Defense to never again procure tanks with gas turbine engines. Borkin reversed his position in 1996, claiming that the T-80U was superior to the T-90. After that, T-80 MBTs were never again used to capture cities, and instead, supported infantry squads from a safe distance. Defenders of the T-80 explain that the T-72 performed just as badly in urban fighting in Grozny as the T-80 and that there were 2 aggravating factors. After the breakup of the Soviet Union, poor funding meant no training for new Russian tank crews, and the tank force entering the city had no infantry support. Russia did not deploy T-80 tanks in later conflicts such as the 1999 Second Chechen War, the 2008 Russo-Georgian War, or the 2014 Russo-Ukrainian War. Russo-Ukrainian War, edit. Russian invasion of Ukraine, edit. During the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Russian forces used T-80 tanks alongside T-72s and T-90s. Some were outfitted with improvised steel grills on top of turrets, nicknamed coke cages by Internet users. These have been fit reportedly to counter top-attack munitions such as the FGM-148 Javelin and loitering munitions. Later into the war the cages were left on and refitted on 2 more tanks after drone-dropped munitions became increasingly prevalent on the battlefield. According to Oryx, as of the 15th of July, 2024, at least 906 T-80s of multiple variants have been visually confirmed as destroyed, damaged, abandoned, or captured. Of these, 4 T-80B, 584 T-80BV, 4 T-80BVK, 36 T-80BV OB. 2022, 98 T-80U, 2 T-80UK, 7 T-80UE1, 1 T-80UM2, 125 T-80BVM, 24 T-80BVM OB. 2022, and the remaining 21 are unknown variants. Exports, edit. United Kingdom, edit. In 1992, the United Kingdom bought a number of T-80 UMBTs for defense research and development. They were not bought officially but through a specially created trading company, which was supposed to deliver them to Morocco. The price of $5 million offered for each tank ensured a lack of suspicion on the part of the Russians. Britain evaluated the tanks on its proving grounds and transferred one to the US, where the Americans evaluated it on the Aberdeen proving ground. In January 1994, British Minister of State for Defence Procurement Jonathan Aitken